Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news for the Wisconsin Badger fans coming out of the transfer portal as former Miami Hurricane quarterback Tyler Van Dyke taking his talents to Madison, Wisconsin. And many of the Miami fans know I've been kind of a defender of Tyler Van Dyke, and I get kind of lost his confidence down the stretch for the Hurricanes. But even Miami Hurricane fans will tell you, Tyler Van Dyke's highs in terms of the talent and the ceiling that he has as a quarterback at the college football level, extremely high. We saw this guy go 21 of 30 for 370 yards, 5 touchdowns against a Texas A&M defense that is very good. And the change of scenery coming into that Phil Longo offense, if you're a Wisconsin fan, you're really excited to see if you can get back that level of Tyler Van Dyke. Because if you do get that version of Tyler Van Dyke, I mean, this offense is going to take massive steps in the right direction in 2024. Really fired up to talk Tyler Van Dyke and then also talk about some other targets that we've identified for the Wisconsin Badgers. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a shout out to the Wisconsin fans. There's been a few of you guys in the comment section saying what targets, basically saying we should do an episode talking about some targets for the Wisconsin Badgers. So we're going to lump that in with talking Tyler Van Dyke. Excited to get into it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. Tyler Van Dyke heading to Madison, Wisconsin. How are we feeling about it?
I mean, you got to be excited if you're a Wisconsin fan because last year you just didn't have quarterback play that allowed you to really, I think, see what Phil Longo's vision is for this offense and what it probably can be because you didn't have guys in Lockie and in Mordecai who could stretch the field. You didn't have that big time arm talent. And with Van Dyke, again, you mentioned it. That's there in spades. I mean, he's as talented as anyone in the country. In working with a guy in Longo who is an excellent QB developer, somebody, frankly, who he hasn't had throughout most of his college career. He's had a lot of changes. He's had some weak coaches. I think Josh Gaddis had a really weak year with him, and that certainly slowed him down a little bit. But again, working with a guy like Longo, you got to think if you can get the most out of Tyler Van Dyke, you got a real star.
That's a really good point. In terms of you look at the Phil Longo offense and the quarterbacks that he's had success with, it's been guys with a lot of arm talent. I mean, in that Phil Longo offense, all portions of the field are going to be attacked. The Tanner Mordecai really have that arm to kind of make a defense defend the whole field? Probably not. I mean, Tanner Mordecai was really productive at SMU, but there's a reason why he was a 5th, 6th-year senior and not going to the NFL. Because he didn't really have that NFL arm talent. You take a look at the quarterbacks that have thrived in the Phil Longo scheme. Sam Howell, Drake May, NFL arm talent. And you look at Tyler Van Dyke, there's a reason 2 years ago you saw Tyler Van Dyke being considered a first-round NFL draft pick heading into the season because the arm talent and the ability to attack all portions of the field is something Tyler Van Dyke certainly has. And you're really excited to see what he can do under Phil Longo's tutelage because it's a guy that, again, very, very talented quarterback.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited about. I want to see what Wisconsin can be. I think you need to, again, we're talking like Nebraska. Like these teams do need to eventually show that you can be a place where really good athletes and really good wide receivers want to go win. Hopefully they can have a big-time year with Tyler Van Dyke and at least set the tone for kind of that change that essentially was said that needed to be happening when they fired Paul.
There's a certain element of, like, I think it was a really foolish of a lot of, like, the people in the national media to say, oh, Wisconsin's going to go 10-2 and kind of breeze through the Big Ten West when you look at the amount of changes, just like from a structure and culture standpoint, going from the Paul Chryst to the Luke Fickell era, especially on the offensive side of the ball, as this offense kind of adopted the Phil Longo scheme. This was an offense that, I mean, 24 months ago was vastly different than what Phil Longo wanted to do. So we had to get a lot of new bodies in there and kind of have these guys learn a completely different language. I think year 2, you'll start to see a little bit more growth on the offensive side of the ball, especially as you add a guy in Tyler Van Dyke, who I think is better suited from an arm talent standpoint to run this Wisconsin offense. Before we get into some targets for the Wisconsin Badgers, I do want to just recap really quick what Wisconsin's done in the transfer portal so far, sneakily, like putting together a nice transfer portal class on the defensive side of the ball. Now, John Pius, a guy that I hand up was not familiar with, coming from Williams-Mary College, you take a look at the numbers from the FCS level, and I don't even care who was at the FCS level because you take a look at just the pure production, 172 tackles the last 2 years, 21 sacks, 35 tackles for loss. I mean, truly jaw-dropping production. And Dill, I'll say this, not being that familiar with John Pius, but looking at the height, weight, and how he was used at the FCS level, Dill, one of our favorite guys from past NFL draft classes, Nick Herbig, it's got to be screaming your name a little bit.
And frankly, this was a huge position in need. I think if you watch Wisconsin, you really didn't have that guy who could go get after the pass rusher one-on-one and go dominant, like what Herbig did and like what TJ Watt's done. And some of these guys who have rolled through Wisconsin, when you had really, really good defenses, you had a couple of really, really good edge pass rushers. And I thought Gertz was solid. I think Peterson's still coming along, obviously, is somewhat of a young player still. But I do think it's nice to kind of bring in a guy with that really high-end potential, it feels like, because you just didn't have that star power on that defensive line in the way you've had it when Wisconsin's been really, really good up front.
Yeah, and that, I mean, like that production, you just got to feel like, yeah, will he put up those kind of numbers at the Power 5 Big Ten level? No, probably not. But if he can somewhat hold that production, you're looking at an all Big Ten caliber player there in John Pearson. Leon Lowry, guy that we're a little familiar with coming from Syracuse, great frame, right? 6'4", 230. That is how you want your linebackers built in the modern college football era. A guy that can go sideline to sideline, had 7.5 tackles or 7.5 TFLs, 3.5 sacks at the ACC level last year. You feel good about the additions they've made so far on the defensive side of the football. But Dale, our focus in terms of some transfer portal targets for the Wisconsin Badgers has to stay on the offensive side of the football. Like, it just wasn't good enough for Wisconsin last year on the offensive side of the ball. And I think it starts now you got Tyler Van Dyke. It starts with the wide receiver room. And Dale, I'm going to ask you a question before we kind of talk about the wide receivers we're taking a look at for Wisconsin. You want to address the wide receiver position. Who are you looking at?
I think you need a big body who can stretch the field. Not necessarily a big body, but just a guy who can stretch the field and again, get through those deeper thirds of the football field, because you didn't have it. I think you wanted to see it from Chimere Dyke. And in fairness, I don't think you had the quarterback play to do it either. Yeah. But you want that big-time number one wideout, especially because you do feel pretty good about a guy in Will Pauling out of the slot who I thought really had a great year. Yes. And frankly, I think Williams and Bryson Green should be really good number twos, like very productive, especially in Bryson Green's case, in guys who I think can complement a really big-time number one deep threat. That's what I think.
And when you look at that Phil Longo offense, like, you do need a stud at the wide receiver position. They tried to address it, right? Last year, bringing in Pauling, Bryson Green, CJ Williams, like a lot of wide receivers coming to the portal. I don't think any of them emerged as that guy. Still, a guy that one of our favorite wide receivers in the portal. He's getting a lot of buzz from the Georgia Bulldogs, but played football with Tyler Van Dyke. And I think Colby Young's best part of the season was when Tyler Van Dyke was the quarterback for the Canes. 6'3", 215 pounds, extremely imposing. And I would argue that during his time at Miami, like, I wish they would let him work vertically down the field more. I mean, you're talking about a guy that is 220 pounds almost, has some really, really good long speed. You're asking for a guy to attack that deeper third and make that defense respect like that deeper third portion of the field. You got the quarterback that's going to make defenses do so. Bring in a wide receiver like Colby Young, because he can certainly do so as well.
Yeah, I think so. Again, a guy who is leaving to me for kind of the right reason. And it's not because he wasn't good or productive, but they kind of had their number one guy with Jacoby George. And I think he will be back for Miami. I don't necessarily know that, but he kind of turned into that guy. It just, the offense started to center around him. And I think Colby Young's looking like, I should be that guy too. I want an offense to be the centerpiece of. And you look at a lot of teams, I shouldn't just say Wisconsin, but a team like Wisconsin would be I think benefit a lot from having that guy you kind of build your passing attack around. Because
the type of wide receiver, like big frame, vertically down the field. So even if it's not specifically Colby Young, that kind of wide receiver, another guy that has piqued my interest in a massive way in terms of wide receivers in the portal, Eric McAllister, coming from Boise State, in only 10 games at Boise State this year, 47 catches, 873 yards. The big thing we're talking about, stretching the field, 18.6 yards per reception. This is a guy that really, I think, excels attacking that deeper third. 6'4", 200 pounds. Again, 18.6 yards per catch. You're asking for a bigger body that can work down the field. Eric McAllister coming from Boise State. Again, not necessarily saying Eric McAllister specifically to Wisconsin, but another one of those bodies that's kind of the body you want in this Wisconsin offense.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, I think as much as we want to talk about the passing attack and making that better, you look at what they need to do up front in terms of like other targets they got to be looking for. I think they probably got to add a lineman or two. You just look like to be 35th in the country on rush yards per attempt with a guy like Braylon Allen, it's just not good enough. I think most Wisconsin fans would think that. And as much as I think you do want to revolutionize the Wisconsin offense, I don't think you want to kind of become they weren't a mediocre offensive line, but they weren't one of the tops in the Big
Oh,
Ten.
I think it massively just underperformed. Like guys like Jack Nelson, who we thought were going to be kind of all Big Ten caliber players, just weren't. And a guy that I'm looking at, and I don't think this is on many people's radar here, Luke Newman from Holy Cross. I've talked about him a few times. Insane numbers at the FCS level. They went and got John Pierce. They're not afraid to dip their toes into the FCS level. And you've seen guys, Jared Verse at Florida State, coming from the FCS ranks and just taking over Power 5 college football. Luke Newman, right? He's not 6'4", 245 anymore. He's up to 310 pounds. They just haven't updated his profile because nobody's given my guy Luke Newman any love. 325 pass pro attempts. He gave up 4 pressures all year. And this is a guy that's one of the more elite pass protectors from the FCS level. And you see guys on the line of scrimmage at the FCS level either go to the NFL or go to the Power 5 and have some success if you want to help your pass pro and just help your offensive line in general with a guy that can play tackle, can play guard, Luke Newman. I think, again, from Michigan, this one would make a lot of sense for Wisconsin.
And frankly, I think you're going to see teams like Texas and Georgia and Michigan, some of these big like teams that have had really, really great offensive lines for a couple of years. I think they're going to start shedding some guys, especially as the season kind of draws on. So that's to me what like I don't think you should be afraid to look for that type of player who, again, was like maybe just a notch below what you needed to be to play on a Michigan or an Ohio State or Georgia or whoever else, Texas. I think that there's me a bunch of those guys because I think when you're looking now, the offensive line portal doesn't necessarily look incredible, especially compared to like running back and wide receiver. Some of those more skilled positions have a little more depth. But I think as this process wears on and especially in the spring, frankly, when guys start to figure out where they sit on their depth charts, I think you're going to have some guys. At the end of the day, to me, all you just need to have more competition because you look at their back, like their starting 5 was okay. Again, I don't want to say they were horrible, but it wasn't great, and there really wasn't a ton of depth. I think you just need guys to push this top group, and you need guys like, again, Jack Nelson, Riley Mullman to like kind of just play a little more consistent and be more on their P's and Q's because you see moments of talent, especially Riley Mullman. I think he can be a very good right tackle, but I think you do need more consistency. You need more edge. You need more attitude. And I think bringing in a couple guys from Georgia and Michigan, like those big schools that are going to shut a couple guys, I think that can kind of crank the hunger up a little bit.
Oh, you won't be. I mean, that's when I talk about like the lines of scrimmage, whether it's defense, whether it's offense, it's depth. It's having competition. It's one, very hard to make it through 12, 13 games of college football season and have all your 5 offensive linemen stay healthy. And then 2, like you said, like having that healthy competition is absolutely massive. I would not be surprised at all if Luke Fickell, even if these guys are just coming in to be on the 2 deep, just elevate where this offensive line is from a depth and talent standpoint. Luke Newman, one of my guys, I think would make a ton of sense for the Wisconsin Badgers. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, I think Wisconsin, we're going to be talking a decent amount about.
I will say, I don't think Wisconsin's as far away as their record indicated. I think, again, they haven't quite found their stars, like their big time players, but I think throughout the team, it's pretty solid. They just need to have a couple guys really perform at a really high level. You got to trust Luke Fickell.
Like, he's proven to be one of the better coaches in all of college football. You had to have expected some growing pains in terms of the change that this program is going to go under. I mean, I get it. You want to be optimistic. 10-2 first year for Luke Fickell. That all sounded awesome. But the amount of change they were going to go through, that wasn't going to be the fact. So Wisconsin, they're going to get active in the transfer portal. We're going to be doing our best to break them down again. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.